The night still lingers in my memory, soft whispers, warm promises, and a vow that felt unbreakable. But promises have a way of fading, and now the same man who held me close looks at me as if I am a stranger. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you. The rain tapped gently against the window, each drop catching the glow of the streetlights outside. I sat at my desk, staring at a half-finished cup of tea, steam curling upward like a ghost of warmth. My name is Ria, and I am 24 years old. For as long as I can remember, I have been a hopeless believer in love. Not the kind that comes and goes, but the kind that stays, the kind written about in novels, where two souls recognize each other in a crowded room and never let go. When I met him, it felt like the world shifted ever so slightly to make room for us. His presence was a kind of gravity, pulling me in effortlessly. His smile carried an unspoken promise, and his gaze made me feel seen in a way I didn't know I craved. In those early days, every message, every call, every moment together felt like stitching a piece of forever. We spoke about dreams, about fears, and about the kind of life we wanted to build. He spoke to me as though I was already part of that vision. I thought I had found the person I could trust with my heart, my past, and my future. I didn't know that trust could be the very thing that leaves you most vulnerable. At that time, all I knew was this. He was the one I would choose again and again. And I believed, no, I knew he would choose me too. The city outside was drenched in rain, every streetlight casting a soft golden blur against the wet pavement. The world felt quiet, like it was holding its breath. We were in his apartment, the air warm and dimly lit by a single lamp in the corner. The soft hum of music played in the background, low enough that it blended with the sound of rain against the windows. He sat close, his knee brushing mine, his hand finding its way to mine with a gentleness that felt deliberate. His eyes didn't just look at me, they lingered, tracing every flicker of my expression, as though he wanted to memorize me. Words began to flow, unhurried yet heavy with meaning. He spoke about the future, our future, painting it with images so vivid I could almost see them. A small home filled with laughter. Quiet mornings with coffee. Days spent building something that belonged to us alone. The way he said it, I believed every syllable. My guard melted brick by brick, until nothing was left but trust. The rain outside seemed to echo the rhythm of my heartbeat, as I let myself believe I had found a place to belong. That night, there was no hesitation, no second-guessing. I gave him my love fully, without holding anything back, because I thought I was stepping into something sacred. I didn't know that the same night that felt like a beginning would become the line that divided before and after in my life. The first thing I felt was the warmth of the sunlight spilling across the bed, filtering through half-drawn curtains. For a moment, I didn't move. I just lay there, listening to the faint sounds of the city waking outside, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional chirp of a bird finding its morning song. He was already awake, sitting by the window with a mug of coffee in his hand. The steam rose in lazy swirls, catching the light as he stared out into the gray-blue morning. For a second, he looked like something out of a painting, still, thoughtful, almost unreal. When he glanced over at me, his expression softened into something warm, familiar. There was a comfort in that look, a reassurance that made my chest feel light. I smiled back, the memory of the night before lingering like the scent of rain that still clung to the air. We spoke little. The silence wasn't awkward, it was the kind of quiet that feels safe, where nothing needs to be said because everything has already been understood. Or so I thought. In the back of my mind, I caught the faintest shift, something almost imperceptible. A flicker in his eyes when they met mine, a pause before he returned my smile. It was too small to name, so I let it go. I told myself this was the start of something beautiful, that the night we shared had tied us closer together. I didn't realize it had already planted the seed for a distance I wouldn't understand until it was too late. At first, it was so subtle I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. The days after that night still held traces of closeness, short texts in the morning, the occasional phone call in the evening. But the way he spoke had changed, almost imperceptibly, like someone slowly turning down the volume on a song. His laughter came less easily. His replies took longer. Messages that once overflowed with warmth became shorter, stripped of the small tenderness I had grown used to. Sometimes I'd send something personal, a memory, a thought, a little piece of my day, and hours would pass before he answered, if he answered at all. I told myself it was work. Stress. Fatigue. People go through phases, I reasoned. But deep inside, a quiet unease began to take root. The way he looked at me was different, too. Where there used to be an unbroken gaze, there was now something fleeting, as if he were looking past me. Our conversations, once fluid and effortless, began to stumble over pauses and unfinished sentences. Each time I caught myself noticing these changes, I'd shake the thought away, afraid to admit that the story I believed in might be slipping. Still, in the quiet moments alone, I could feel it. Something in him was retreating, step by step, and I was standing still, waiting for him to turn back. The days stretched on, and the space between us grew wider, like a cracking glass spreading silently until the whole pane threatens to shatter. I used to hear from him every morning, a good day message that felt like a small thread keeping us connected. Now, entire days passed without a single word. When I reached out, the replies came hours later, brief and hollow, as though they were sent out of obligation rather than desire. The conversations that once spilled over into the night now ended in minutes, clipped and empty. At first, I tried to fill the silence myself, sharing little details about my day, sending him things that reminded me of us. But my words felt like stones dropped into a bottomless well. There was no echo, no ripple, no sign they had reached him. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed, staring at the dim glow of my phone, willing it to light up with his name. It rarely did. The quiet became a constant presence, pressing against my chest until it was hard to breathe. I didn't need him to tell me what was happening. The silence was already speaking for him. And in its stillness, it told me everything I didn't want to hear. I decided I couldn't live in uncertainty any longer. My chest felt heavy with words I hadn't spoken, and I knew I needed to see him face to face, to look into his eyes and ask what had changed. We had our spot, a quiet cafe tucked away on a narrow street where the smell of fresh coffee always lingered. I messaged him early in the morning, asking to meet. He agreed with a short reply, the kind that left no warmth between the letters. I arrived first, choosing the table near the window, my heart thudding in my ears. I watched people pass by outside, the cold air making their breath visible in small clouds. I kept glancing at the door, expecting him to walk in any moment. Minutes turned into half an hour. Half an hour became an hour. My coffee had gone cold. The waitress came by twice to ask if I wanted anything else, her eyes darting to the empty chair across from me. My phone stayed stubbornly silent. No call, no message, no excuse. The only thing I had was the growing realization that he wasn't coming, not to the cafe, and maybe not back into my life at all. When I finally stood to leave, the chair scraping against the floor sounded louder than anything else in the room. I walked out into the evening air, the city moving around me, its rhythm steady and indifferent to the way my heart was breaking. The worst part wasn't that he didn't show up. It was that I knew. He didn't care to. The truth didn't come from him. It rarely does when someone is trying to hide it. Instead, it arrived in fragments, carried by whispers and half-finished sentences from people who didn't know they were telling me anything at all. It happened at a friend's gathering. Laughter, music, and the faint clink of glasses filled the air. I was trying to lose myself in small talk when I overheard two voices behind me. They spoke his name, followed by a name I didn't recognize, hers. The words tumbled out casually, as if they were common knowledge. How they'd been seen together. How comfortable they looked. How quickly he had moved on. Each word was a shard of glass pressing deeper into my chest. I wanted to turn around, to demand clarity, but I didn't need confirmation. My heart already knew. I slipped away from the party quietly, the sounds fading behind me until there was only the dull thud of my footsteps on the pavement. The city lights blurred in my vision, the night air cold against my cheeks. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that he hadn't been avoiding me because of some unspoken problem, but because he had already replaced me. And the man who once promised me forever had made me invisible without even saying goodbye. That night, the walls of my room felt closer than ever, pressing in with a suffocating stillness. I sat on the floor beside my bed, knees pulled to my chest, the dim light from the lamp stretching long shadows across the wall. I didn't cry at first. I just stared at nothing, my mind replaying every moment we had shared, his laughter, his promises, the way his hand once fit perfectly in mine. Each memory felt like it had been stolen, rewritten into something unrecognizable. Then, without warning, the tears came. They weren't delicate or quiet. They were raw, wrenching sobs that left my chest aching. I cried until my throat felt dry, until my body slumped against the wall, drained and hollow. I looked at my reflection in the mirror across the room, and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, her lips trembling. But it wasn't just my appearance that felt foreign, it was the emptiness in my gaze. I realized I wasn't just grieving him. I was grieving the version of myself that had believed in his words without question. The girl who had trusted so fully she never imagined those promises could be broken. And as I sat there in the dim light, one truth settled heavy in my chest. The person I had been before that night was gone. The morning light crept into my room, pale and cold, but it didn't sting the way it had in recent weeks. I sat at my desk with my phone in front of me, my fingers hovering over the screen. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for his name to appear. Instead, I opened my contacts, found his number, and pressed delete. The screen flashed briefly, and just like that, a piece of him was gone from my world. One by one, I erased the photos, the saved messages, the little reminders that had been clinging to me like shadows. It wasn't an act of revenge. There was no satisfaction in the clicks and swipes. It was quiet, deliberate, necessary, like closing a book I no longer needed to read. I went for a walk that afternoon, the winter air sharp against my skin. The streets were the same, but I felt different, lighter in a way that surprised me. I stopped for coffee, sat by the window, and let myself watch the world without feeling like I was on the outside looking in. Somewhere deep inside, a shift had begun. I wasn't healed yet, not even close, but I had taken the first step towards something I hadn't felt in months, peace. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need his closure. I could write my own. Weeks later, I found myself walking down the same street where we once used to meet. The air was crisp, the sky a soft wash of blue, and the city carried its usual hum of life. I paused in front of the cafe we had claimed as ours, and watched strangers sitting where we once sat, laughing over coffee as if the world had no sharp edges. I didn't feel the familiar sting this time. Instead, there was a quiet detachment, like looking at an old photograph and remembering a different version of yourself, one you had already outgrown. The memories were still there, but they no longer held power over me. His promises, once heavy chains, had dissolved into nothing more than distant echoes. I had built new routines, new moments, and slowly, a new version of myself, stronger, steadier, unshaken by his absence. As I walked away from that street, the winter sun slipped through the buildings, casting a warm glow across my path. It felt symbolic, like the universe reminding me that no matter how dark some chapters had been, there was always light ahead. He had chosen to disappear. But I had chosen to remain, and to rise. And this time, the ending was mine to write. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you.